Hi everyone. If you could just make your way to your seats, that would be really fantastic so we can get this last session of the day started. I hope you've had a productive day so far and an insightful one. And just letting you know the details for dinner tonight. So you're invited, everyone's invited to a casual dinner and drinks at 6:30 p.m. upstairs at City Extra. So it's just over the harbour at Circular Quay, just near Wharf 3. If you need any further instructions or details, please come and see either Sarah or Lisa. But we hope you can all join us for dinner tonight. And now I'm going to hand over to Vivek, who will run this last session.
Thank you, Kira, especially for helping me out on directions to dinner, which they asked me to do, but as I do not know Sydney at all, you would have ended up somewhere near New Delhi if I gave you directions. Okay, friends, welcome to this last session. The good news is you won't see me up here again. It's the last time. And this is what has been touted as the SSC Masterclass. And very soon we'll get 4 eminent SSC people to tell you about various parts of the SSC cycle, which by the end of this hour, you'll know how to ride this cycle. But before that, taking a step backwards, as it's an SSC masterclass, and as talking to some of you, I realized that many of you know SSC intimately and live and breathe it, but some of you may not necessarily. And especially as IUCN National Committee here, many of you may be IUCN members and wondering what the SSC members are, etc., etc. And I know that it can create some confusion. So 2 minutes just to clarify things up front. So the IUCN, as my fellow esteemed councillor Peter Cochrane can also testify, is a many-splendored, many-headed hydra, which is wonderful in its absolute variety. And to begin with, the reason IUCN itself is different from other agglomerations of humanity is that it includes state and civil society, subnational governments and federal governments, and IPOs, all under one big umbrella, coming together to solve the problems of nature. And under this big umbrella, there are three essentially parts of the union, which are supposed to work together to form the international union. So it's a union of 3 parts. So the first part are the IUCN members, of which I'm sure many of you are IUCN members, given that you're in the room. And these are organizations, as I said, whether they are states or civil society, who pay a membership fee and qualify to be a legitimate member of the IUCN family, and these are spread across the world. The second part of the union is a secretariat, which serves as a secretariat to this union and serves the members with its several regional offices and national offices. I just visited your regional office in Fiji yesterday for the region, and national offices, and works in a way to facilitate things in the region through the national committees and the regional committees. And we've got the national committee chair here as well. So that's the second part of the union. And the secretariat and the offices have their own projects and their own staff, and a number of staff who many of you may know personally. So people sometimes think of them as IUCN. People very often don't think of members as IUCN, but you are IUCN members, and therefore, here I can see that there's a strong and vibrant national committee, which is bringing people together, but I know regions where that's not the case, so people need to be told that you are also IUCN. Each one of you who is an IUCN member is IUCN, so IUCN is not just a secretariat. But there's a third part, which is what I'm bringing you to, which are the commissions. So there are 7 autonomous groupings of skill and knowledge and wisdom under 7 thematic areas, one of which, and possibly the older one, is the Species Survival Commission, the second oldest, I believe. There was one commission before the SSC. But the SSC was formed in the 1940s, so it's a venerable organization. And it has today 11,500 members, as I mentioned before, grouped under more than 200 specialist groups, many of them taxonomic, like the Australian marsupial specialist group, etc. Some of them thematic, like the invasive specialist group. Some of them national, like the Australian Species Specialist Group or the Australian Plant Specialist Group. And some of them just different ones, which just sprung up in typical IUCN way. But nevertheless, that's the grouping of this. And I just want to make sure you're not asleep at the end of an evening by asking how many of you are members of any SSC specialist group? How many of you are members? Okay, a few. Not as many as one would have liked to be, given that it's a species congress or symposium. But this may be a good opportunity for all of you to maybe go to the SSC website and look at all those specialist groups. And remember that end of quadrennium and beginning of next quadrennium is October at the World Conservation Congress. And that's a very good time if any of you have expertise in any of those areas and aspire to be one of those specialist group members to maybe bung in something to the chair, the relevant chair of each group. Each group will have a chair or co-chair. How many of you have used any of the SSC plans? Any of the SSC plans for your work? Okay. Still a sprinkling, and I don't know whether it's the same sprinkling or not. And how many of you have been part of assessing an organism, any organism, for the red list? Oh, that's a larger number. That's good to see. All right, good. So at least you are in some way in sync with today's workshop, which is to take you through that cycle of assess, plan, and act. And I must say that all these, from the 40s, the assess part has been there. It's been the cornerstone, red list for many, many years. Now the green status as well. And then plan came in a little later, but has been there for quite some time. And act is the newest component. And to introduce you to these three things in more detail, let me call upon Kira Mileham, who has been a cornerstone of the SSC under the last two chairs. And I hope she'll continue if I come as chair as well. She's been there the longest, I think. And she describes herself, so she should be described as a partnerships director of SSC. That's her formal title. But she likes to describe herself as a matchmaker for species conservation. So over to you, Kira.
All right. Hi again, everyone. Thank you so much for bearing with us. I know it's the end of a long day, but it's promising to be a very insightful panel. Just give me 1 second. And as Vivek said, I'm just going to cover a few of the things that he just mentioned in a little bit more detail. But I will go through it reasonably quickly. If you have more questions about the Species Survival Commission, how it functions, the kinds of tools that we have, or the ways in which you could work with the SSC, please come and find myself or Vivek or any of the panelists you're about to meet. But I'm just going to quickly give an overview of who the SSC is and how we work. So as Vivek has mentioned, we're a science-based network with over 11,000 volunteers. And we are in almost every country and territory around the world. We have experts in 186 countries, including 467 members here in Australia. So it is surprising that we're having an IUCN Australian Committee meeting focused on species, and so few hands were in the air saying that you're members of IUCN specialist groups. There are 467 members of specialist groups in this country, and historically, they're mostly in part of our global specialist groups. So part of our crocodile specialist group, or our Sirenia group, or our cactus and succulent groups, or some of our fungi groups, and working with our global communities on species conservation, assessment, planning and action around the world. Increasingly, as you'll hear over this next session, we're mobilising more across taxonomic expertise within Australia. And so we expect this number to grow. But the point of today's session is to really look at the overlap of work that you're all doing in the room with the way that we're mobilising species experts under the SSC umbrella, and how, as Vivek said, this is the IUCN. The IUCN is not someone sitting in Switzerland or Cambridge or working remotely. It's really from the ground up. The SSC is how we connect with experts on the ground to make sure your expertise, your knowledge and your priorities are feeding up into national level processes and IUCN international platforms and beyond. So just quickly, SSC's objectives do span everything that Vivek's just talked about. We monitor biodiversity as well as assess threats. We develop policies and best practice guidelines. So things like invasive species. Our invasive species specialist group manages the International Invasive Species Database. They provide best case guidelines on how to manage invasive species in many, many different scenarios around the world. They work very closely with CBD and CITES and CMS and other platforms on managing invasives at a global level, but also convening invasive species experts around the world. So if you're here in Australia working on invasive species, but haven't connected with the Invasive Species Specialist Group, there's a global community out there that you can be connecting with and learning from, and also amplifying your work and learnings around the world. We facilitate conservation planning, we stimulate and support conservation action. So we're not primarily a frontline conservation action organisation, but our specialist groups help to mobilise and stimulate conservation action. And we try to reconcile economic development and societal changes with biodiversity. But primarily the role of the SSC is convening species expertise and species conservation experts around the world to work as one community. As Vivek said, this is just a little bit more detail about how the groups are organised. We have different taxonomic groups. So mammals still represent the largest bulk of our network, but we're working to improve that diversity. Plant, we have fungi specialist groups, so there are taxonomic groups. And then we have increasing numbers of cross-cutting groups. As Vivek mentioned, these are national groups and also thematic groups. This is just a splattering of our very diverse logos. If anybody has a marketing or advertising background, don't eye twitch too badly. We have great brand consistency, you can tell. You're going to hear a little bit more in a minute. I'm going to go through so you can get to meet these fantastic people. But the new chairs of our Australian Species Specialist Group, Janice Chanson and Dr. Janice Chanson and Dr. Jess Marsh, and the Australian Plant Specialist Group, which is, Dr. Tom Le Breton is representing that group today. Dr. Rachel Gallagher wasn't able to join us for the symposium, but sends her best regards as well. So you'll meet them in just a minute on the panel. In addition to our volunteer experts, we also work with partner organisations around the world. You heard from James earlier about the Centre for Species Survival Australasia. We have many partnerships that have paid full-time staff working in partnership with these volunteer networks, as James said earlier, to help us catalyse assessment, planning and action. And just finally, the work that we all do together is what we've heard multiple times throughout today. It's really just borrowing a performance management cycle and applying it to species conservation. It's not rocket science. It's just a way for us to get more strategic and coordinated about the work that we do. So across our 11,000 volunteer experts in 200 groups and all of our partners around the world, we work to assess, plan and act and mobilise a network and support that network and communicate the work that we do. So these are the components of the species conservation cycle. And we really encourage you to think about your species conservation work in these components as well. It's really helped us to mobilise and organise the targets and be able to see and set clear priorities for species conservation at the local, national and global level, and to monitor and measure the effectiveness of those efforts. We're going to talk more about each of these components in the panel. And so just lastly, I want to highlight some of the tools that you could be using that you might not be aware of within IUCN. Please come along to a session tomorrow morning about IUCN tools and frameworks. It's a workshop that will be running straight after the plenary with James and Janice and Tom and Jess. And they're going to delve a little bit more deeply into the red list, the green status of species and key biodiversity area identification. And then we have things like position statements and best practice guidance. And they range, these are just a splattering of examples, they range from the guidelines on the use of ex situ management to wildlife conflict and coexistence, conservation planning, conservation translocations, something that Andrew was talking about this morning, so guiding principles on creating proxies for extinct species for conservation benefit, things like managing confiscated live organisms. There's lots and lots of best practice guidelines out there, as well as case studies. So please do let us know if there's areas in which your work could benefit from connecting with more of a global community, or that we can learn from you. And then finally, this is the way that I like to visualize the role of the SSC, is not to panic, but to organize, to unite against the big threats that we face in nature conservation and the species crisis. But we can do it, we just need to work more together and face those threats in a united, efficient way. So that's the SSC, and I'm gonna invite you again to open up Mentimeter, and I'm going to ask Vivek to come back up and run the panel, and we're going to be asking you to contribute your responses alongside the panel over the next half an hour. So thanks so much.
Yeah, big hand for Kira. Right, let's get the four experts up here. Yeah, do you have all of you? Do come up, and I'll introduce you as you can hold up your hand when I introduce you. I'm sure most of you know them anyway. So from the left, if one were to go, Dr. Tom Le Breton is the co-chair of the new Australian Plant Specialist Group. You just heard Kira say that we've got one of the co-chairs up here. So that's Tom. He's a research associate at the Centre for Ecosystem Science in the School of BEES. Don't ask me what that is. But he has a lot of experience on changing fire regimes for threatened plant species and vegetation. That's all I'm going to say in introducing him, but he, as I told you, he's a co-chair of the Australia Plant Specialist Group. On his left is Janice Chanson, the co-chair of the Australia Species Specialist Group, and the Species Assessment and Australian Manager of Rewild. She's a global red list authority for IUCN Amphibian Specialist Group. She's been in the amphibian world for years and years, for as long as I've been in conservation, and sits on the global red list, which is not, don't laugh, that's not that long. Don't yeah. If you laugh too much, it's at me. Right. That's all I'd say about you then. And to Janice's left is Dr. Anne Wignall, the convener. Oh, sorry. I skipped Jess, sorry. Dr. Jess Marsh, also the co-chair of the new Australian Species Specialist Group. And she is ARC Industry Fellow at the University of Adelaide in the School of Biological Sciences. And her work is focused on highly range-restricted taxa, invertebrate taxa, which are often of elevated conservation concern. She's also the co-founder of the charity Invertebrates Australia. And on her left is Dr. Anne Wignall, the convener of the Conservation Planning Specialist Group, one of our specialist groups of the SSC, in the Oceania Regional Resource Centre in New Zealand. Am I right? And she also has invertebrate biology. So we've got two invertebrate specialists on the panel, which is not very often. So that's very good for all of you to know. So here are the four panelists. And what we're going to do is, if you can scan your Mentimeters, we're going to ask you questions, some of which I'll put to them as well, and some of which I may ask them a different question. But the very first one, which should be coming up on your Mentimeter panel, if you've scanned it, is how can we improve the assessment phase of species conservation in Australia? How can we improve the red listing or green listing assessment in Australia? What do people think? And I'm also going to ask exactly the same question to all of you. Whichever one wants to go first. Tom, being the first, can start off. Tom.
Is it? All right, is that better? So Australia is really fortunate in some ways in terms of assessment because we already have a really developed assessment infrastructure all around the country, across the states and the federal government. And it's quite integrated and it's already aligned with the IUCN Red List assessment criteria through a thing called the Common Assessment Methodology, which a lot of you might already be familiar with, which came into force in 2015, I think. So our species that are listed as threatened, the majority of them are already assessed under the IUCN Red List criteria. The unfortunate thing about assessment in Australia is we're really far behind on some key groups. So mammals are quite good, birds are quite good. I think amphibians are okay. Yeah, they're quite good. Plants, we've only got a handful. Well, we've got 1,000 on the federal list, but we have 18,000 endemic species alone, and most of those haven't been assessed at all. And then invertebrates and fungi are just stuffed. But so trying to get things up to par there is like the first priority, and I'll let other people talk now as well.
Yeah, Janice, you want to go? And if any of you can turn around at the same time as you talk, there are questions, answers coming up there from the audience, if you want to address some of them.
Sure. So how can we improve the assessment process? I think there's a big misconception within Australia that in IUCN we have 100 or even 1,000 people sitting in the headquarters of IUCN Dingle, Switzerland, doing red listing. That is not the case. The red listing globally is done by volunteers through the Commission, people such as ourselves. So I sit up here as the co-chair of the specialist group, the Red List Authority for Amphibians. I sit on the Global Scientific Committee for the Red List, but I don't get paid by IUCN. I work for Rewild, who is a Red List partner. And so I think it's really, really important to acknowledge and realise that the vast majority of work done in this red listing space and assessment space and in IUCN space is done by ourselves here. And I really like the fact that Vivek said before that you're all IUCN as IUCN members, and that's why you're here as members of the Australian Committee, is we are all IUCN, and so we all have that responsibility and we're all doing it. Those people that I think there's this misconception exist, I talk about it as they're the ghosts of IUCN. They don't exist. People think there really are 100, 200 people sitting in IUCN churning out the red list. I asked Kira today how many people are paid by IUCN to create red listings, and I think we came up with 5. Literally 5 people. Now there are people that are helping with the framework and getting listings on there, but actually creating red lists is done by people sitting next to me here, whether it's invertebrates or plants, people in the audience. It's our scientists, and they're the same people that are working on our EPBC listings. It's the same people. And so I think we really need to work together, the government and IUCN as members of IUCN, to really bring together those two processes, the EPBC listings as well as the red listings. We shouldn't have anything that's on the EPBC listing that's not on the red list. It's crazy, and Ricky will kill me for this, but we have freshwater turtles just outside this building, the Ballinger River turtle. It's critically endangered on the EPBC Act on our listings. It was last year. It's data deficient on the red list, and it was last assessed in 1996. That's not okay. Okay, we've really got to improve what we're doing and see red listing as the global language for threatened species. EPBC listings have their place. They're fantastic. They bring legislation, but they're not the global language which we speak. I sit in a global NGO. A lot of my role is to try and bring in foreign investment into Australia. If I go to a foreign donor, particularly, or honestly anywhere out of Australia, and I say to them, hey, I've got the Ballinger River turtle, it's critically endangered. They say, I looked on the red list, it's not on there. And I say, oh, it's on the EPBC list. They can't find that, and they're not going to fund it. So if we want to bring in any kind of investment, which we need to do in Australia, we need to speak the global language of conservation, and that is the IUCN language, and that is what IUCN brings to the table.
Brilliant. I'll take one more intervention on this question. Jess, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. I was going to speak to the statement there about needs to be more strategic, looking at extinction group by group. Am I making noise? Oh.
No, if you just hold it like you're singing at karaoke, that's all. That'll be better.
So I work on invertebrates, and they're obviously very underrepresented in threatened species listings. They also represent a huge problem to conservation. We know that, or estimates suggest that we've lost thousands of species in Australia, and we're losing a high rate moving forward. So the most recent estimate was 1 to 3 species a week going extinct in Australia. So this presents a massive problem. We've got huge numbers of species that currently can't be catered for under EPBC Act listing because there's so many and there's lacking data. By taking a systematic approach, targeting groups that we know are likely to be of conservation concern, the red list provides an ideal mechanism for this initial prioritization of species. So we're not looking at this great big mass of unknowns. We can start pulling apart the priorities. We can mark those species that are likely least concern that we don't need to worry about. But then we can move towards protecting and putting forward EPBC assessments for eligible threatened species. And I think that parallel use of the IUCN Red List and legislative threatened species listings is really incredibly powerful. We basically can't continue with business as normal because we know that extinctions are happening. We know that we're not addressing or even able to recognize most of these extinctions. But I think by grouping together, by working collaboratively, by using this huge resource of experts that are working towards species listings in species specialist groups, we've got a chance of basically understanding what's happening and hopefully then taking the steps forward to prevent some of these extinctions.
Right. Let's move on from the assess thing to the plan thing. So if you can get onto your Mentimeters again, there's another question for you there. I think the question says, what are the strengths of threatened species planning in Australia? But no harm if you mention the weaknesses as well. So what do you think you want to mention about? I got a nice copy of your Australian species plan today by your threatened species commissioner who gave me one. So that's one example. Or there could be other plans. Oh, hasn't that come on?
It's just not loading. I don't know why. It should be fine. Keep talking.
Yeah. So she's telling me I should keep talking. But anyway, I mean, all of you can start answering or thinking as to what you think are the strengths or what should Australia do better in any of its plans, be it the federal government's plans or IUCN plans or the plans that exist for threatened species in Australia. Yeah. So I'm afraid the IT is giving us a bit of problem.
It is. I'm not sure why. But we can talk to the panel because they can still answer. They can answer.
Yeah.
We just can't
Okay. So you can continue to answer, and I'll move to the panel, and here I'll move straight to Anne, who is in the Conservation Planning Specialist Group, so she's the right person to answer this. Anne.
Thank you. I think in terms of the strengths, you only have to look around this room. I mean, Australia has such a diversity of knowledge, experience, and perspectives to draw on that it's just a fabulous opportunity. I think in terms of that opportunity, we can really exploit that a lot further by having more participatory planning processes. And so sometimes when we create plans, we have plans with maybe species experts in the rooms and a bunch of academics, maybe some policy people and government. But how many of us have been involved in plans that haven't really been implemented once they've been written? And so one thing that CPSG does, and one thing that we really have embedded within our philosophy, is having participatory planning processes where everyone who's able to contribute to a plan, but also those people that may be affected by that plan come together to discuss the development of that plan so that when that plan is developed and when it's agreed upon, everyone has buy-in on it and everyone's perspectives has been brought into. And so that makes that plan much more likely to be implemented in the end. And that's something that we really go by. And sometimes that can be a little bit difficult because it means that you have people in the room that disagree because we have people that may be coming from a very different perspective. You may have people coming from industry, people from different NGOs, different organisations. There are different values and different interests. And so what we do is we work by invitation to come into those planning workshops as a neutral facilitator. And so we can help by navigating those difficult conversations and by not having a stake in that plan ourselves, by only working by invitation, we can help to ensure that everyone's voices are heard in that planning process and end up with a plan that everyone can get behind and agree on and actually act.
Okay, would any of you like to comment on plans as well? Tom? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to, so this goes back to the assessment component a little bit as well. But one of the problems that we have in Australia for the less assessed groups, all of the conservation planning prioritisation happens around the species that are listed or around threatened ecological communities that are also listed. And so there's not a lot of accounting outside of threat management for things that aren't yet listed and aren't yet assessed. So that's the vast majority of Australian biota. So in terms of planning around that, there needs to be much more effort that goes into accounting, figuring out, first of all, what we don't know, which is a lot. There's lots of areas of the country that haven't even been properly surveyed for where species occur, which is the first thing to understand when you're assessing a species. And once we have that baseline level of knowledge, then we can begin to do much more comprehensive planning and plan things like complementary actions that are going to have much more return on investment for conservation.
Okay. Have people put in? It's wonderful that you started with "we are doing it" and your passion. So that's good. That's a beginning at least, right? And people are passionate enough to write that I'm from New Zealand, but I won't answer this question. I love it. I mean, it says you're still going to write that. But moving on. 8 or 10 of you put up your hand when I asked if you are a member of any specialist group, and Kira just informed us that 467 people are members in this country. So clearly we have not managed to attract a lot of them to this room, despite this being quite a good room and a full room. But nevertheless, I'd like in the next Menti, and let's see if this works now, or we have to get Kira up for everything, I don't know, but I'm trying. I'll ask all of you who said you are members to put in which group you are a member of and how you are involved with IUCN SSC. Even if you're involved in a different way, you're on red list assessment or something, why don't you just put how you're involved with IUCN SSC? Meanwhile, I'm going to ask the two specialist groups, the two newly formed specialist groups, to actually tell you what they're about, right? Because they will want your involvement, they will want all of you to help them in their new roles and trying to get the Australian species and parts of it, which is Australian plants. We'll start with a subset first, Australian plants. Tom, what is your mantra for Australian plant specialist group? And what do you want from this audience? You want anything from them at all?
If anybody's got any money that they'd like to throw at plant conservation,
all right.
Fantastic.
Here's an honest man. He wants money.
No, so our mantra, we don't really have a short one that's about 10 pages long. But no, basically, we sort of came together. There's about 30 of us in the plant species specialist group, and a lot of us, our approach has been to work across sectors. So we consist of a lot of academics, but also a lot of practitioners and a lot of people in government who work in assessment in government. And the goal is to help facilitate what's already happening, basically, and build on that and coordinate across regions to identify and fill the gaps rather than having things sort of happen the way they are at the moment, which is either at the state level or the federal level, where everybody's a little bit doing their own thing and there's things falling through the gaps that aren't getting picked up. So that's the first angle in terms of the assessment stuff. We're working right now with the CAM group, the CAM working group, to come up with a sort of an agreeable approach to transitioning things from the EPBC list and eventually state lists onto the red list. And then in terms of planning, the goal is to start working towards identifying and filling knowledge gaps in species geographic range, ecological knowledge and taxonomic information. We're also working with, or planning to work with Indigenous groups. We're in the very early stages of that. I think that's a large gap in the assessment and threatened species space in the past. There hasn't been a lot of conversation about what Indigenous people are saying on the ground about what's disappearing, but also what the priorities are for them. And we're working with Tegan Goldmere from Western Australia, who's got awesome framework about culturally significant species. So that's the very short version.
Okay, and would Jess or Janice want to? Jess, I can see you got your mic up.
Yeah, so with Janice, I'm a co-chair of the Australia Species Specialist Group. Now, this group was formed to basically become a central focal point for the people who are working on red listing and conservation assessments in Australia. So what we have at the moment is a lot of people in separate groups working on different taxa, and the Australian Species Specialist Group is a way to bring these people together so that we can share knowledge. There are some people in the group who have been, Janice, who have been working on assessments and know the red list in and out, inside out. There's other people who are relatively new, and so by coming together as a group, we can share that expertise, share that knowledge, and really try and drive forward red listing in Australia. One of the aims and one of our kind of main things we want to do moving forward is to be as collaborative as we can, working with different members and working with government and stakeholders. I think by being a point of contact where we've got our experts, we're doing the red listing, we can work with government to share information and to help facilitate EPBC assessments by linking them with the relevant experts. I think there's a way that we can really kind of work together to progress assessments in Australia. Janice, did you want to?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, all right. I just wanted to say my 2 bits, which is that in India we also used to do, I was just listening, so not that I know how this works here, but from what little I've listened, it looks like there is a Australian government listing and there's a red listing, right? In India also we used to do this for years and years and years, but actually we used to call it, even in India we used to call it the National Red List, and having been an advisor in the ministry also, I wear many hats, and one of them was to get the government to do their red list, but the IUCN red list was different. But a couple of years ago, we started an SSC center that brought together 2,500 scientists of the government and the 500-odd SSC members together, so we don't have to redo stuff for things like endemic species, and you have a lot of endemic species. So, you know, in an endemic species, it doesn't make much sense to do a global one and then a different Australia one, which presumably will be the same if you do it. But anyway, I mean, if people are in the same room, I think you know, a lot can be worked out. And not knowing more than that, I will not like to comment more. But I hope that the 2 species specialist groups can now help maybe bring practitioners and the government and IUCN members together to try and get a comprehensive understanding of Australian species. Kira is swiftly trying to get the next one up. No, you could, which is, no, absolutely. No, you're right. You're on the right track. I was going to commend you. By the way, on these ones, I mean, there was somebody, again, very honest people. Somebody said no, and no, or whatever. So most people had not heard of SSC. Good that you said that. But somebody said that you want to be a member of one of the groups, Conservation Translocation, and you're writing, and whoever it is, come to me bilaterally, and we'll try to get you in touch with that chair very quickly. Okay, so if you go to the last one, and if you had, Janice, something to say, you could also say it when I ask you about the last one, which is really how can we increase our collective impact of species conservation action for Australian species? Because eventually, whether you assess and plan, but if there is no act component at some level, then we're not doing things for the right reason. So somebody has to do that act. It could be IUCN members, which could be the state, which could be some other people who are using these assessments and plans and actually doing the stuff on ground. Or maybe the panel will come up with other ideas of how we can act to get the Australian species out of what I heard today, at least for mammals, being the worst extinction spiral that's happening in the world, which is quite horrifying for me coming from outside. Which one of you would like to take it on first? It'll also come up on the Menti when we try to get this working. Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to take it on.
Sure.
As Vivek very kindly said in the beginning, I've been involved in red listing for decades. And what I found is, probably if I had to say what my memories of that are, is really, really hard to find funding to do assessments. I don't think anyone in here involved in assessing has come across anything different. It's really, really, really hard. And I'm sure you would also agree it can be very, very difficult to get funding to do planning. Where the money's at is in action. If you want to get progress and really make efforts, especially in the nature positive space that's really developing, and in the philanthropic space, if you really want to see progress in your assessments, link it to planning and link it to action. That is something I'm going to really stress really hard, because I sit on both ends. I wear two hats in my job: species assessment, which is my role here, and then my other role is Australasia Manager for Rewild. So as I mentioned before, I'm trying to bring in foreign investment into Australia, into Australian conservation. Selling red list assessments to a big donor is not very exciting. But if I can tell them that they're going to save 35 amphibians or this many marsupials, they sit up and they want to take notice. So this is the key thing we can do with the IUCN cycle, is assess, plan, act, by putting it together. And many of you in this room, including these people on the panel, they're involved in that. Jess has set up her own at the NGO, the Invertebrates Australia, and they're doing action. So she's involved in assessment, but she's also passionate about seeing that action on the ground. And so the Assess, Plan, Act is, I think, the final link that we've got now in IUCN that is really essential. That if we don't act, what's the point of doing assessing and planning? And for me, I've been involved with the Global Amphibian Assessment, which I've now run for 25 years. The first one had a wonderful paper that we got in Science. We were super excited, and it was great. And then we went back and did it again for the second one. We got it in Nature this time. Science rejected us, but we got in Nature, we were excited. And then I suddenly went, you know what is the point of getting this in Nature or Science if the amphibians are still dying? All I'm doing is documenting extinctions. What is the point? And so we've really changed our focus and our strategy to be assess, plan, act. And if we don't do that assess, plan, act, then we are just documenting to extinction. But it does open doors for you. That's what I really want to stress. If you can link those three together, they're happy to give money to assess that species and plan for it if you're going to be able to save it as well. That's where you can really tap into some funding.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and?
Yeah, I absolutely second that combining the three together is the way forward. I think also that, and I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here today, but by having everyone in the room together during that assessment or planning process, you really can actually increase your opportunities to fund the action and get those resources on the ground, and actually assign actions during that planning process so that they are implemented as soon as you leave that room. And so that's one of the things that we really advocate for, is that there's no point in creating these plans, and they're beautiful documents, if you're not going to act on them. And I'm sure that really most experts could sit in their office by themselves and create an absolutely fabulous plan for that species. But if you're not going to get buy-in from all of those other people that might be affected by it or might be able to contribute to it, then you're not going to get the action that you absolutely need. And so, yeah, joining those assess, plan, act together and having everyone working together on that plan is how I think you're going to get the action.
Okay, I really want to get some questions in from the audience as well, but just as an end to the panel, 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, very short. What do you want to get out of these 2 days? You can start, Anne, and then we move. What do you want to get out of these 2 days?
More collaboration.
More collaboration. Good word. Yes.
Yeah, I second collaboration, and also discussions and ways forward for the taxa that can't currently be adequately treated by species level assessments.
Okay, a little more than two words, but still concise and focused enough. Thank you very much. Janice.
Unification around a common goal, that we're all here for the same thing. We're all here to save species, and we're all going about it in our different ways and our different strengths. It's just fantastic. Let's all come together and unify
Okay.
the same thing.
So collaboration strengthened. Tom?
Nothing.
Oh, that's one word.
Nothing new to add. Sorry. Yeah, just what everybody's already said. Like collaboration and finding out how we can all work together better.
Excellent. So collaboration seems to be the big theme coming out of this panel. And I'd like to take at least a couple of questions, if I may. So you may raise your hand. Yes, madam. I'll take you first. I think one, just wait for a mic to come up to you. And meanwhile, may I see any more hands? Okay, right.
Just hold it close to you now.
Two.
Yeah, okay. I'm just wondering, so the plants, the EPBC Act, so that's federal listed plants or plant communities, and this, the individual states have also got their own legislation. So is that also, that's question number one, is that also assessed, or does it need to be on the EPBC list to be considered for the red list? And then the next question is, what does it actually take? So if I have a plant which I can see is becoming really rare now, what do I do to get it on the red list?
What a good question. But I'll leave you, Tom, to answer that.
So I can answer the first question a little bit better than the second because I'm still wrapping my head around getting things onto the red list. Janice will take that. In terms of the first one, so under that common assessment methodology, the way it works is for anything that's endemic to the states, that first gets nominated to and assessed by the states, and then it gets aligned on the federal EPBC Act. So it should be the same listing between the two. If it's a species, yeah, there's a backlog of alignments that are still sort of happening slowly. The species that occur across borders, that's principally the realm of the EPBC Act, so nominations should go through them. But then states can also make regional nominations and list if there's part of the species range where it's really threatened, say in Western New South Wales, it can get listed in New South Wales as a threatened species, but it won't be listed nationally if it's not threatened nationally. It can go on the red list whether or not it's assessed under any state or federal legislation.
So I'll talk to a little bit about that. The red list and the EPBC, they are totally separate processes. So it's up to government at the moment in terms of what they decide to assess with the EPBC Act, and then the red list is independent of government, which is a requirement also that it is an independent source. So in terms of if you have a species and you want to get on the red list, this was a big part of why we created the Australian Specialist Group as well, is we want to become that central hub where anyone that wants to become involved in red listing can come to the one big specialist group, Jess and myself, contact us, and we will put you in touch with the right person. We know the IUCN system, we have access to that, and it will at the end of the day go to the taxonomic specialist group that has the authority over that. So it's a bit, for those of you that aren't, of which it sounds like most of you aren't part of specialist groups, how it works is on the red list, when you see a listing, we can't have someone submit one this month and then the following month someone submits a different one, etc. We have instead a red list authority who is the authority for the red list assessment. For amphibians, I'm the global red list authority for amphibians. So if it was a frog, you come to me and I would work together with you. We do the red list assessment, make sure everyone that needs to be involved is involved, and then we would submit that through to the red list. So we want to become that sort of central hub, and I'll add my little bit that I wanted to add before. If there's anyone here that wants to become part of our group, just come and talk to us. There's no minimum requirements. You don't have to be a member of any other specialist group. We love to expand our taxonomic coverage, and just anyone that's interested in hearing more, being part of it, is welcome to join. So there's no sort of exclusivity or requirement to be it. We're a very inclusive group, and we absolutely want to extend that opportunity to people to become involved. So yes, talk to us.
Excellent. We have one more question. I don't want to run over time. One more question.
Thanks, guys. Great presentation. There's a couple of you on the panel just said to increase our collective impact, we need to collaborate more strongly. How? Like personally, I do a lot of collaborating. I think everybody in this room does. It's exhausting and there's so much more we need to do. So just saying we need to do more isn't quite cutting it for me. So I want to know how. How do we get the more effective collaboration to increase our reach, to get that when I feel like we're all trying really hard to do that. And it might be the money thing, but I think there's more to it than that.
I'll give you a perfect example. So sorry to always come back to amphibians, but when we had to reassess the amphibians for Australia as part of the global amphibian assessment, I started approaching some of our experts in Australia, some of whom have been here today, and said, hey, we're about to do global amphibian assessment. It'd be really great if you could be part of it. And they said, oh, really? We did the EPBC listings last year. Do we have to go through this all over again? It's the same people doing the EPBC listings that are doing the red listings. If we collaborate, maybe we could do the one workshop together. And so it would actually be less funding. So with collaboration is try and bring some of these processes. We're not going to have red listing or EPBC listings. They both serve a purpose, absolutely. But we could collaborate a lot better to make it a much more seamless process. And for all the scientists that give the data, it's a lot better for them to be contributing to the one process rather than two separate processes. So for me, it's not sort of collaborate and create new things. It's actually just do the things we need to do better, is where I see, and that's where I was sort of talking about unification, coming together and doing things together rather than separate.
Yeah, and adding to that, you now have a platform. You have an Australian species specialist group. So it's not outside, it's supposed to represent all of you, and an Australian plant specialist group. So all of you could, whether government or civil society or academic or whatever, could collaborate through this platform, so that there is now a platform available as well. Oh, sorry, Anne, last words.
I'll just add a little bit more to that. I think that when we think about collaboration, we often think about collaborating with government and with scientists, sometimes with NGOs and First Nations groups, community groups. I think sometimes we need to broaden our perspective of what collaboration actually is, and that's actually inviting industry, mining, forestry, the people that are usually regarded as causing the problems to the table as well. And that's something that I think is starting to happen a little bit, but I think really needs to be promoted a little bit more so that we can have those difficult conversations and actually get agreement and action from people that may be contributing to species decline, but also have a lot of money that might be able to contribute to some of the solutions. And even with people that are in industry, nobody wants to see a species go extinct. And so sometimes you can get buy-in by inviting those people that aren't usually at the table to the table.
And apart from money, it's extremely important, of course, to deal with private sector, and not just in the Commission and SSC, but Peter, in fact, chaired, or still chairing, isn't it, for the next 4 months, the private sector task force for IUCN, trying to see where we can collaborate and or listen to them. I mean, there's absolutely no way you cannot listen to them. If they, as you say, are the main threats to your species, then we must listen to them in the same room. I was about to close it, but I have a fun girl wanting to say something about fun guys.
Thanks very much, Vivek. It would be remiss of us to have an IUCN Species Survival Commission session where we've spoken largely about plants and animals. And Jess also mentioned quite a lot about underrepresented taxa. So I just want to do a shout out to fungi. We've got a lot of work happening within, that was, if you didn't get Vivek's joke before, that was the reference. But I want to do a shout out to fungi. We have lots of fungi experts within the Species Survival Commission, but we also are working together on a global pledge called the 3Fs Pledge, which is calling on governments and partners around the world to not only focus on flora and fauna, but to include fungi in all of your conservation efforts, but especially in conservation legislation. So if you're reviewing, whether you're working at state or federal level, if you're reviewing biodiversity acts or any legislation that covers flora and fauna, we just really encourage you to think about how fungi can fit into that as well. It's an incredibly important kingdom representing millions of species that are very important for the way that the other species function as well. And so if you want to connect as well on fungi, we also have fungi species specialist groups and a lead that is part of the Australian Species Specialist Group. So if you're thinking, I know some mycologists, but they don't sound like they fit. They certainly do. We welcome all of our fungi experts as well. So thanks so much for making time.
Well said, Kira, because fungi are really the bedrock of human survival too, whether it's agriculture or pharmaceuticals or whatever else. Without fungi, we face extinction far faster than if one of the mammals went. So clearly, important kingdom that we need to look at. Okay, folks, that's all. I think we are on time. And now you can follow the earlier instructions to go to the Circular Quay or wherever else dinner is tonight, those of you who wish to join. But thank you very much for attending this wonderful thing. And thank you to the 4 panelists for having been the masters of this masterclass. Thank you very much.